Okay, we're back again, and so far we've seen how to get a copy of your repository and add files to it, and we've seen that there's some useful advantages to version control because, for example, if we were to accidentally delete a file, we've seen that we could recover that. And the more normal thing is that we will be making modifications to a file, and over time you may be fixing things in your code, adding new features, and it would be useful to understand what changes have been made over time. If you suddenly realize that your code isn't working properly anymore, you can go back and look at time and or look back in time and see what changes have been made and try to correlate that to why the code is no longer working. So right now we're in the Jolt subdirectory of our working copy that's been checked out on the corn machines. And right now we could use the svn status command, and svn is reporting no information, which indicates that all of the files are under version control and there are no changes that have been made to files that haven't been committed yet. So let's go ahead and make a change to our little Hello World program, and maybe we've decided that we want a more formal greeting, so we're going to change hello to greetings. And so we're going to go ahead and use our favorite editor to make that change, and we're going to go ahead and compile that code, maybe run it and make sure everything's working properly. We get our friendly greeting from our program, and now you will notice that if I rerun the svn status command, there's a couple things showing up. One is that the hello.cpp file is listed, and to the left of it, it says M, and that's svn's indication that there are local modifications to that file that have not been committed to the repository. And then we also see hello, which is the executable that was created from this source code, and it has a question mark next to it. And the significance of the question mark is that this is a file present in your working copy, but it's not under version control. And standard practice is generally that you would not commit your executables to the repository. So you would only put the minimum number of source files necessary to build your software. And things like executable, it's assumed would be compiled by someone who has checked out the code and run the commands to compile the executable for themselves. So now we're going to go ahead and commit our changes to the repository because we're happy with the changes we make. The code compiles and runs. Usually the last thing that you would probably want to do before you go ahead and commit your changes is just review those changes, make sure that you're committing what you think you are. And there's a handy way to actually see what changes have been made. So if I use the svn client command and provide the diff verb, that's going to tell it that I'd like to see the differences in a file. So we know that there were modifications to hello.cpp, and if we run this diff command, we will see that there are a couple changes, and the minus sign to the left here of this line is indicating that it was removed from the file. And there's a plus sign next to this other line indicating that that file has been added. So you don't get a character by character breakdown, but you do get a line by line breakdown of which files have been modified, removed, added, etc. So if we're happy with our changes, we can go ahead and commit those. Now this file is already under version control, so we don't need to run the add command on it yet. SVN's already aware that it's under version control, so we can just go ahead and commit that file. And again, we should provide a useful commit message of what we're doing, why we're doing it, etc. And we go ahead and run that. It'll indicate that it's sending those modifications to the server, and it's updated the revision number of our working copy to reflect that we've made changes to the files. after we've committed the changes, if we rerun svn status, what we'll see is that hello.cpp no longer shows up as modified because it is consistent now, and the version we have in our working copy is the same as what we have on our centralized repository server. And if we were to try something like this and try to look at differences, of course there's no output because we haven't made any changes since our last commit to the files. So if I wanted to make further changes and maybe go back to my Hello World program, and maybe I want something less formal and just replace greetings with hey, how's it going, I can go ahead and do that, and I can now see that SVN is indicating that there are local modifications to that file in my working copy. Again, I could do svn diff on that file, and it would show me exactly which lines in my code have been modified. And I could play around with that and maybe go ahead and compile the code, test it out. But maybe I decide that I really don't like that informal greeting and like to go back to the previous version of the code that I committed with that earlier version. And what I can do is, just like I was able to previously revert a deleted file, I can actually revert my modifications to the working copy of the files in my account here. So I'm going to revert hello.cpp. It will show that the file's been reverted. If I run svn status, it no longer shows as modified. And if I diff the file, again, there's no changes. And if I were to open that up in an editor or display it on a screen, I've gone back in time, and now I have the previous version of the file that I had committed to the repository.